Hello and welcome to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. I'm Liz Plumpton. Each episode takes a look at the wonderful world of amateur theatre and features an amateur theatre maker talking about their theatrical life, theatrical loves and the times when they've died on stage. This month's episode focuses on James Graham's play Labour of Love. I'll be speaking to Katie Merriman, who plays Jean Whittaker in the Crescent Theatre Birmingham's forthcoming production of the show. I've also been talking to Rod Natkiel, video producer and director, about his experiences of using video on stage, in multiple shows and in Labour of Love. And now I'm delighted to be joined by Katie Merriman. Katie is an actor. She's also worked as a production assistant here at the Crescent Theatre. Welcome to the podcast, Katie.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, Liz.
Great. Okay, let's kick off with our stock questions then. So, tell us about your first love.
Well, I always remember at primary school, where I think a lot of it sort of kicks off for most of us. I used to always be in the school productions and activities. And then I remember this one year, I was in the juniors and I had the measles or German measles and I was off school and they were casting the school production and I was distraught. And I just remember, I don't know whether my mum had told them that I was distraught or whether they'd already put a part aside for me, but they said, no, it's fine, we've got a part for Katie. So I was absolutely over the moon. And I remember that just sort of sitting there and just feeling really at home, looking at a script, being part of a production, and I just loved it. So I've always...
Can you remember what the show was?
I can't. It was a Christmassy sort of one, but it wasn't a nativity. It was like a Christmas story. And I just remember one of the lines in it was, I had to prod someone and say, sheep are not stupid. That's all I remember from it.
Early comic potential there, obviously. And if there is one, what's been the love of your theatrical life?
Oh, there's just been so many. I've had just so many wonderful shows, times in productions and parts, characters that I've played. But I think for me, the out of all of the dramas, the comedies, the most special thing for me was playing Barbara Windsor in Cleo Camping, Emmanuel and Dick. It was a true labour of love. There was a lot of us Carry On fans involved and, real die-hard Carry On fans. So to be part of that and to, really live the Carry Ons for, about 2-3 months and perform as Barbara Windsor. I mean, it was a dream come true for me. Yeah. So, that's got to be the highlight of my theatrical life, I think.
Yeah. So what was it like playing someone so, well known and iconic?
Yeah, it was 2008, I remember, because we tied it in with the 50th anniversary of the first Carry On film. Mm-hmm. And some of us who were part of the production, we did a pilgrimage to Pinewood Studios and we joined the 50th celebrations there. But it was something that I knew I had to do. But it absolutely scared the life out of me because it's, obviously Barbara, she's such a, iconic person,
and very specific, like, voice and the way that she performed in those films. Everybody would recognise it if you've ever seen, even if you're not. Have to admit, I'm not a massive Carry On film fan, but I've seen enough to know, that
oh, definitely. The how she talks, her accent is one way of one thing which was needed to really sort of get right, but also her laugh. I think there was a lot of practice that went into the laugh, and I did manage to pull it off. And I wouldn't be able to do it just now off the hoof because you kind of get out of it. It's a real heart. You have to really sort of laugh into it, and it was really scary. It was quite daunting, but once I was sort of doing it, and also for Craig Dealey and Andy Jones, who Andy was playing Sid James and Craig was playing Kenneth Williams. Three people that they're sort of ingrained in British sort of history, really. So these big personalities, and it was we were just so proud of it. And I must admit, I had the worst post-show blues ever after that one. It was, I loved it so much. It was really important to me.
Oh, I've seen the show, but not that. I didn't see that production. I saw it somewhere else, and it is. I think it's a super play. Like, even if you're not a massive Carry On film fan, the stories of the people and the humour, but also the pathos.
Definitely, because it was obviously it was set around. It was based visually. You could see which Carry On films they were from, but it was mainly about the relationships between Sid and Babs and Kenneth Williams, and the story, behind the scenes. So I think it sort of would appeal to non-Carry Oners as well, and it was really quite touching as well. There's so many parts that you're like, oh gosh, which were quite sad. So it was lovely, loads of fun, and really, really meant something to me.
Great. Tell us about the one that got away.
Do you know, it's so funny. The one that got away for me was Educating Rita, and I always wanted to play since I saw the film, and I thought, I really want to play Rita one day, and it came up in the season, the Crescent season. It was announced about 10-15 years ago, and I was probably just the right age. I could have got away with it. I would have auditioned for it, but then it got pulled from the season, so I didn't get to do it. And obviously, in our last year, Educating Rita was back on.
Was on, wasn't it, 2024 last year?
Yeah. And obviously, I'm much too old for it now, and so I couldn't obviously audition for it. But it was just I haven't watched it already for years, and so watching it and watching, Vicky used to perform Rita. She was absolutely amazing. So it was really special for me watching her, and especially doing it so amazing. She was everything that I would have really hoped to see, and she was just fab, and obviously Bill as well. But it was just brilliant. But for me, that was the one. A
little bit bittersweet.
Yeah. I'm too old now.
You have to do Shirley Valentine in a few years. Start going up towards that.
I know, Whatever happened to Baby Jane?
Yeah. Katie and I are about the same age.
We could do that.
Okay. Tell us about a time when you died on stage.
Oh gosh, do you know? There's a couple that one where I actually physically got murdered, and another one where I died without realising I died. So the one where I physically died on stage, it was so funny. We were doing this show called By the Bog of Cats. And it was an Irish sort of, ghosty, folky sort of, tragedy. It was sort of based on the old Greek tragedy. Was it Greek? Medea,
yes.
Yeah. So a lot of people got, ended up dead. And I was one of them at the end. And anyway, so I had this one bit at the end where I was just doing this last sort of speech, and then I had to sort of turn around and get stabbed. I had to get killed by Colin Simmons, who was playing this character called the Ghost Fancier. Anyway, the knife which had been thrown earlier, Colin came in, and this one night he couldn't find it anywhere. So when we faced each other, and I was about ready for him to get his knife, and he just sort of looked at me very calmly, and he went, "No knife." So I looked at him and I thought, I wonder how he's going to kill me. And then he just sort of throttled me really, I was like, and we sort of did this sort of strangulation scene instead, which was, amazing for Colin to sort of...
And basically improv.
So we kind of got through it, and Colin Simmons was fabulous. So that's one time that really sticks out when I've actually died on stage. And I remember actually in the Carry On again, actually, there was this one bit where Barbara Windsor is sort of sat talking to Sid and Kenny, and telling this story about Ronnie Knight, her husband's just come out of prison and whatnot. And then I just sort of I thought I'd come to the end of what I was saying and just sort of stopped waiting for them to, and they were just both still looking at me, and I thought, one of us has forgotten something, and I thought, well, I don't think it's me. So I improvised, thinking I was saving the scene, and just sort of went, well, I don't want to talk about it. All right. And anyway, so they went, oh, all right, yeah, we'll carry on. And so I thought, oh, well, of course, out of that. And then afterwards realised I'd missed a chunk. So, yeah, I think it's scarier when you know you're supposed to say something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
You know it's you. Yeah.
Rather than, it's not as scary when you think, oh, somebody else has forgotten something. So, yeah, I didn't realise I'd forgotten. But anyway, yeah, that had nearly died on stage. Yeah. But I definitely dried on stage.
Brilliant. Okay, let's talk now a little bit about Labour of Love by James Graham, which you are currently in rehearsals for, and which is on in February at the Crescent Theatre in the studio. So in the play, you play Jean Whittaker. She's a Labour constituency agent for a constituency in North Nottinghamshire. Tell me a bit about the play and your character.
So the play's essentially about Labour, obviously at the heart of it, the Labour Party, and it's changed from old Labour to new Labour, and it starts from sort of 1990 and goes up to 2017. So it spans 27 years of the party. So there's a lot of political information in there, you know, telling the story of Labour's change from old to new Labour. There's a Labour MP who, you know, wins a seat in a Labour constituency, and it's his first time being an MP, and he's from a more sort of, you know, this is around the time of old Labour morphing into new Labour. So he's coming into this traditionally old Labour, very old Labour,
mining community heartland.
Yeah, with these sort of new ideas, a more centrist approach, and it's very much about how he and, you know, him and Jean, who is the very much old Labour, you know, it's that kind of trying to find common ground, trying to work together, see the world from each other's points of view. And the backdrop of that is sort of 27 years. It spans from 1990 to 2017. So there's a raft of information about how, you know, the change from old to new Labour, and how things progressed, and all the, you know, the sort of events, the things that were happening in that time, you know, around this kind of the Labour Party changing. So it's political, but it's also a very, you know, there's very personal stories which we're telling, and obviously a little sort of love story as well. So, but yeah, it's, I mean, obviously when you say political, you know, you might kind of instantly sort of think it's quite heavy, but it's really not. It's very clever and it's very funny.
It won the Olivier for Best New Comedy, I read.
Yes.
I think. So it is very much a comic look.
Yeah.
At the sort of, I don't know, the battle for the soul of the Labour Party, maybe.
Yes, definitely. And I think as well, there's it really one thing that sprung to mind, which really made me laugh, was you know, that, you know, there's bits in I don't know if you've seen The Life of Brian, when there's the Judeans People's Front and the People's Front of Judea and the Popular People's Front. You know, there's all these sort of factions of the same sort of party, and you know, it's very much, you know, those sorts of things, you know, come up, and trying to sort of get your head round, you know, where people sit on a certain scale of being in the same party. So it's fascinating. It's very interesting. Yeah, it has been very interesting.
So as you've mentioned, the play spans a period of 27 years, but it's not completely chronological, is it? It moves backwards, and then forwards. Yeah. Through that time. What are the challenges of that for you as an actor?
Oh, so I think as an actor, there's more challenges, I think, than actually just coming to watch it, because I think you'll be able to see, you know, but having it in your head. So we start 1990, and then we sort of go back in time in Act 1, and then sort of start and go back to the future in Act 2. So it's it's at first it's tricky as an actor too, because we're so used to sort of, you're doing a play and you're telling a story from start to finish, and you're learning things, and things seem to, you know, go in an order that makes sense.
Yeah.
So jumping in and out in a different order is it's challenging. It's fun as well. But it's
Do you
trying
have to remember how old you are all the time, like your character, how old you're meant to be?
Yes, and who you're married to, and you know, it's trying to think at what stage.
Sounds
am
a bit
I
Elizabeth
as
Taylor.
well.
That was a bit Elizabeth Taylor there. Who am I married to today?
That's it. It's who am I married to? What's going on in you know, that political moment of the time? How am I feeling? So you're kind of matching, instead of it following on, you're kind of jumping in and out, trying to, you know, remember or have in your head, well, actually, you know, I'm feeling like this at the moment because, you know, this has just happened and the quarry's just closed, and, you know, so I'm not, you know. So that's a challenge, I think, for actors. But it also, you know, when you're reading it and, you know, I hope when you're watching it, you know, it's a great way of, you know, asking. I think it keeps the audience on their toes, because something will happen in a scene, you know, that there's questions that need to be answered, and you're like, oh, I wonder what happens there. So, and actually that question doesn't maybe get answered till later in Act 1, or even at, you know, in Act 2. So, you know, and and also there's certain points in the, you know, something will happen in Act 1 that only really makes sense in Act 2, and then you're like, oh, I get it. Oh, so
like peeling back the layers.
Yes, that's it. So it's fascinating. It's but yeah, it comes with its challenges.
And what do you think that non-linear structure adds to the play for an audience?
I think it is that keeping it fresh and keeping it, you know, I think you're seeing characters and asking questions, and you know, knowing that there's something else to come. It's kind of almost like knowing something, or something's going to happen to them, and you think, oh gosh, that, you know, a bit later on, you don't know this is going to happen yet. And I think it kind of almost involves, you know, you as an audience member more, because you kind of having, it's more like a puzzle that you're trying to fit together. And, you know, I know that might sound like hard work, but I think especially when it's a comedy, it's not, it's because you're
quite satisfying as well, though, when things fit into place and you go, oh, right, so that's why that happened.
Yeah. So it's a big puzzle.
So, as you've mentioned, the play explores the changes within the Labour Party during 27 years.
Yeah.
And there's some major political events going on as the backdrop to the characters' changing relationships. Have you done much research into the history of the play? And or how much of it do you actually remember?
Quite a lot of on both counts, really. Because, you know, because it is such a, there's so much in there about, you know, we're talking so much in conversation, you know, in the script about things that have happened in the Labour Party, and there were, you know, some of it that I didn't understand. You know, I'd heard names of, like, you know, particularly, you know, more sort of obscure, you know, people, but there was, you know, I didn't really understand their relevance to the whole Labour story. So I like to research. You know, I did a lot of research around, you know, the start of the Labour Party, how it started, how, you know, what, especially after, you know, the Second World War as well, you know, and how things had been sort of shifting, and already the factions within Labour who, you know, were pro or against, you know, for or against. For one of the big things is the nationalisation or denationalisation, and that's been a question for, you know, which I didn't realise for years.
Still is.
It's
well. You know, they've been the current Labour government are exploring or have explored renationalising the railways.
Exactly.
So it feels like we're still back. You know.
Yeah. So finding out about you know, what the world, and also what I'm saying, how, you know, it helps you as an actor to understand your character more, and you know, really sort of feel that deep root passion and think, oh gosh, and but actually there's lots I do remember as well, because the 1997 election was the first one, the general election was the first one I voted in. So I think you're probably the same, or were you slightly
my
younger?
birthday is the 4th of June and the election was in May, so I wasn't 18. I was just too young to vote, but I do remember it.
Yeah, it was a massive thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was like I always had a certain interest in politics, in the sense that there was always such big characters. You'd always see, like, I think we always knew who Neil Kinnock was and Margaret Thatcher, and so we always kind of, it was, and we always had it on that different.
I mean, I remember the '92 election because I remember my parents staying up to watch it, and my family was Labour voting, still is, and being really disappointed because they thought maybe they were going to win.
Yeah.
And John Major, John Major won that election.
Yeah, because it was getting closer, wasn't it? It just felt like that was a more of a, there's a good sort of chance here, and like you say, didn't happen. And then when, obviously, Tony Blair, I mean, I knew that it was a massive thing because there hadn't been, all I'd remembered really, all I'd remembered was Margaret Thatcher being in government.
I was born in '79, so that's the year she was elected.
Yeah, so I was born 77, so I don't
Thatcher's
remember
children,
else.
Katie.
I know, I know. So it was a massive thing. It was, but I think as well, what I've only really, by doing this play and really researching, I knew there was an old Labour, but I don't think I had a real appreciation for what that really, that was a massive thing, especially for the proper diehard, old Labour supporters.
Unions. And,
it was, and even now, so how controversial some of the decisions and the, like that, getting rid of that clause 4, that denationalisation, that part in there, what's it called? The Constitution for Labour. So it's been a real sort of, it's been fascinating for me. So I kind of, I always like to do a lot of research into the world of, whatever play I'm doing.
And tell us a bit about Jean. What's she like? What are you enjoying about playing her?
I love Jean. She's always been, from where she grew up and lived, and she's always been Labour through and through, and a mining town, and her husband, who was a miner, and also the MP. She's lived and breathed the Labour Party, and she's so passionate, and it's like it is her life, and I just love how she's so dedicated and loyal and funny as well. She's very funny, very sort of one of those sort of women who you just sort of suck it up and get on with it. Really just get on with things. I like as well how she's very ingrained in Labour. Don't get me wrong, but I like how she's not completely closed to the possibility of change, compromise. So, but, with a lot of well, you tell me why. You give me that information.
So there's a kind of love-hate relationship that develops between your character and the MP for the constituency, David Lyons, as the play unfolds. Is it a romantic comedy?
It's hard to... I wouldn't badge it totally as a romantic comedy, because I think that's kind of a very much secondary thing. It's not... I think it's almost something that is a byproduct of a growing admiration and respect for each other. So it's definitely something there. So there's that tension, and you can see when it rises and falls, the bubbling of it. So it has those elements, But I think I don't know whether you'd call it a rom-com. Definitely.
And how have you and Mark Thompson, who plays David, approached the dynamics of your character's complex relationship?
Yeah, I think we sort of see through the text, through the as I say, what's happening, how are they. It's really interesting to watch them sort of battling, against what their beliefs are and challenging each other. And I think we kind of see the sort of bat and ball of that as the basis for how any sort of affection or mutual trust and respect grows. So I think we very much kind of focus on that,
Yeah.
and that kind of takes care of itself really. Then the the sort of the softer side, where you can kind of really start seeing that they're actually starting to care about each other, and that kind of with the circumstances then in their own personal lives, it's almost like where they allow themselves to feel a bit more, and so I think we kind of use the like I say, their sort of political relationship as the basis for how anything else grows.
And now we come to our backstage binaries, Katie. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions, and I'm just looking for your first instinctive response, and you can then clarify one or two of them at the end.
Right.
On stage or backstage?
On stage.
Studio or main stage?
Studio.
Act or direct?
Act.
Lighting or sound?
Sound.
Rehearsal or performance?
Performance.
Tech or dress?
Dress.
Modern or period?
Period.
Comedy or tragedy?
Comedy.
Set or props?
Ooh, set.
Old Labour or New Labour?
New Labour.
Right wing or left wing?
Left wing.
Privatisation or nationalisation?
Oh, mixalisation. Oh, I'll go for nationalisation. Oh, I don't know, because it's a bit of both. Like you can tell, I'm sort of New Labour, can't
divided,
you?
Are there any of those you'd like to clarify?
I think with on stage or off stage, obviously I love performing and I love being on stage. But equally, since the kids got to a certain age where I could do more in a year rather than one big show, I've started doing some backstage work as a production assistant, which I've absolutely loved. And I think it's really important for everybody to, especially if you are just an act, if you're, that's predominantly
your
what
main
you do,
focus,
is acting. I'd just encourage anybody to, just do something, try, one of the backstage elements as well, because it just really, I think it just really adds to your experience of the whole theatre community as well, and you feel part of it in a, a deeper way as well. So you do really sort of get a lot out of it. And there's so many things that, I love the, we've got construction, wardrobe, props and lighting, sound. There's so many sort of areas, isn't there? Wardrobe, that if you've got a little bit of an interest in or a skill, for, there's so many things. I actually quite like the idea of doing a bit more in construction, because I'm useless with things like that. And I'd like Colin Judges to teach me how to make things.
Yeah.
Be more useful at home then as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Katie. And we look forward to seeing Labour of Love running in the Ron Barb studio later in February.
Thank you, Liz. This has been lovely. Really nice. Thank you.
And now I'm delighted to be joined by Rod Natkiel, who is a director and producer for both stage and broadcasting. Hi, Rod.
Hello.
Rod's also been a member of the Crescent for the last 9 years. And you have been on the podcast before, Rod, as a studio guest back in, I think, 2021.
Yes, it feels like a long time ago.
Yeah, so we've got you on today to talk a little bit more about the use of film and AV in stage productions, both generally and specifically in the Crescent Theatre's upcoming production of Labour of Love. So you've got professional experience in producing television, film and theatre. What are the benefits of using film in stage productions, in your opinion?
Let's just be a bit pedantic to start with. It's hardly ever film. It's video. I mean, running film into theatre fills makes my blood run cold, the idea of doing that. But we still say we're going filming, so we manage to confuse the whole discussion.
Yes.
I think it has the great advantage of moving a story on and giving the audience more information. Even the best plays in the world can't tell them everything. Yes, you might want to leave them guessing, but sometimes I don't think you do want to leave them guessing too much. A good example was The Girl on the Train, where I felt there was quite a lot of stuff had happened in between one scene and another scene, which was not in the play. The
Mm.
audience didn't know, and it informed the upcoming scene. So you think, well, and there was another reason why it was good for Girl on the Train as well, which was practical. But this was a way of actually making sure the audience understand what has happened, and it informs the next scene. It gives them more insight, I think, into the characters. And going back to the practical purpose, it keeps a play to pace in some ways because, for example, on that one, it was a massive set with 5
Mm.
different sets in it, which poor Grace Cheadle had to belt around at a rate of knots. And the instruction was to get there by the time the video finished. And
Right.
some of them were really short. So it kept the pace going. There was no opportunity for it to linger.
Mm.
And it engaged the audience in looking and listening to something when uninteresting stuff was going on the stage, like props being reset or something.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great storytelling device. It's also a distraction, but it
Mm.
adds a dimension as long as it's done for a purpose. I think that's the key thing.
So The Girl on the Train was quite a modern piece in terms of its setting, and I suppose modern audiences are, we're always engaging, aren't we, with all sorts of digital media and screens. So do you think it's more likely that you might choose to put video into a play that's set now or in the recent past?
I think it's got to be on the style of the play. I mean,
Mm.
you could, and people do, write very modern plays about very old stories.
Mm.
And if it suits the play, that's fine. I don't think it's a question of suiting the story.
Yeah.
It's the play. And would you put it into a Shakespeare? I think you might put it into a very modern, super modern production
Mm.
of a Shakespeare. If you put it into a traditional Shakespeare, that might feel very odd.
Yeah.
Very odd indeed. And I go back to my first question, which I would always ask the stage director, which is why?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Because contrary to what a lot of people believe, it's a lot of work. To do it properly, it's a lot of work. And there's got to be a good reason, not just, oh, it would be nice.
Yes. Yeah. So, which leads on a bit to my next question, I think, which is what are the challenges of incorporating video? So, if you've decided, yes, it is the right thing for this piece and it's here for this reason, what are then the challenges of making it practically work?
I think from the more aesthetic point of view, which is as the director of the video, it's really well, you need to work very closely with the stage director. You've got to know how the scene is going to end that you're coming out of,
Mm.
if or the moment that you're coming out of. It might be in the middle of a scene, but you've got to know what it's coming out of, what it's going into. So what you're leading into in terms of tone and pace and temperature. And then there are very important practical considerations, which not least of which is making sure the audience can see and hear it
Yeah.
properly. And I get annoyed when I think somebody's gone to a lot of trouble to make that, and it's on a dodgy screen with a dodgy projector. The stage lights are up full,
Mm.
and you're not giving this a chance. And I personally would always try and steer stage directors and designers towards LEDs or plasma screens where you can get a really sharp image.
Yeah.
But then the lighting director's got to play ball as well because you've got to in a way that suits the play. You've got to get the lights down at that point.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's a bit of a waste of time. So I think it is aesthetically, how does it fit? What does it do? And then how do we make sure it's seen and heard to its best possible way?
Yeah. And there's, I mean, there are examples of, recent or fairly recent modern productions that have incorporated the use of video in really kind of creative ways, which I have to say do often involve projecting them onto the set or something that is on stage that isn't a screen. But I guess that is a harder thing to get right.
Um, yeah, and it's tricky and it's very clever. And if we look at another medium, which is television, the classic way of doing that brilliantly is Strictly Come Dancing, where they will create an entire environment which does not exist at
Mm.
all. Um, and you think, how is it that the dancers are all in colour and the scenery is all in black and white, and then it's just disappeared?
Yeah.
Um, but that, of course, they've got all the technology to back that up, and doing that in the theatre is much harder, but incredibly effective. And I think, having seen Story of Pi, The
Yeah.
Life of Pi,
Yes.
and From the Circle, seeing the most fantastic projections where you think that really has captured the feeling of torrential seas and beautifully
Mm.
done, beautifully timed, all cued at the right point. Um, Much more difficult.
Yeah.
And then if you've got a multi-level, multi-piece set and projecting onto that is going to throw all sorts of different problems in, but can be incredibly effective.
I suppose incredibly expensive as well.
Very.
And we're talking now in in the context of an amateur theatre. I don't think probably we're quite at that point to
No,
be able to afford the kit
no.
that you would need to
Yeah.
do some of that
And the
stuff.
programming skills.
Yeah.
It would be these people are rare still who can program to that level. They'll become more and more common as the younger generations who've lived
Mm.
and breathed this every day of their life come through. But at the moment, to find somebody who can really program that really well without it taking forever is quite hard.
So, what would you say are some of the pitfalls of using film on stage? When maybe naming no specific examples if they're from recently here, but um, when doesn't it work, or why doesn't it work?
I think it's relatively simple, which is when it doesn't answer the question of was there a good reason.
Yeah.
Um, that's annoying. If you look at something, you think, well, why have I just been made to watch that? It didn't do anything for me. Um, and then if it's been badly made.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of insulting to people who produce video or film or indeed radio, when the stage directors and actors will put their hearts and soul into getting every second of that right and think that you can just knock it off for a piece of video. And
Hmm.
actually it's not. Boringly we live our lives by 25ths of a second. Every 25th of a
Yeah.
second matters. So when you look at it, you think that was not well made, or more to the point, why was it there? And if it's done that, you
Mm.
think this is just a bit silly and it's
Yeah.
distracting.
Yeah.
Because of course, if we go back to all the cliches like suspension of disbelief, if you're trying to get your audience, your live audience, to go into that world, and then you distract them with something that's irrelevant,
Yeah.
I don't think that's clever.
Sure. Yeah. If it becomes, I guess, the weakest link in the show, then
Yeah, absolutely.
it's not earning its place there. And how do you see the future sort of evolution of the use of video and AV in theatre? And do you think AI will play a part in this?
Oh, I think AI will definitely play a part in it. I mean, it's already playing a part. I mean, we've
Mm.
had CGI for decade. I don't know how long,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
than a
More,
decade probably,
yeah.
with some extraordinary stuff. Oh yes, actually, much more than a decade. Some extraordinary stuff with CGI, and AI will definitely take a big part of it because it will just do stuff on a scale and a speed which human beings really can't. And you can throw a challenge at an AI, at an artificial intelligence. You can throw a challenge at it, which it will manage, and it will manage
Mm.
it more and more and more. And I think we'll see in live theatre. I don't know whether you and I will see it. Hopefully, but we'll see holograms coming into place. We'll
Hmm.
see nothing on stage at all, and yet we'll be in a completely real world,
Yeah.
and that will be created with holograms and whatever's coming next. I have
Who
no
knows?
idea. I
Yeah.
have no idea, but it's really exciting. I mean, I think with Intelli, we're going to get smell vision. We're going to be getting no piece of kit at all in a corner of a room. You'll just be able to press a button, and the whole world will appear in front of you. That I'm sure the military are already doing something
Yeah.
like that because they nearly always lead.
Yes.
And I think that will come into theatre where,
Mm.
and you'll have to use the technology. It's not something that I think even a large number of human beings can do because it's so complicated. But if
Mm.
you could actually look at our main house stage, in theory, press a button, and there is Elizabethan England.
Yeah.
Um, and people will be able to walk through it, be able to walk through the doors, and you think, how's that happening?
Yeah. So
And it's,
that's going to be a whole other skill set for actors as
isn't
well,
it?
isn't it? Interacting with something that's not tangible in the way that we are used to doing.
I mean, the forerunner of that, which actors, when they address it for the first time, find really quite hard, is green screen. Um, I did a children's drama once where it was set in a cartoon, and they had to come in and out of the cartoon pictures, and at one point they had to climb along the top of the frame of the
Yeah.
actual cartoon frame. So all they had was a completely green screen and a green wardrobe rail, which they just had to climb along. And it was because we did that first and then showed them what it looked like,
Mm.
they could understand it. But when you're saying to somebody, just imagine there's somebody there, or you imagine you are this, it's really hard. And we've had generations of actors getting used to green screen, and some people do it really well. Some people never get used to it, and
Yeah.
some people are just in the middle. And I think once you start dealing with non-existent sets,
Yes. Yeah.
You think, right, okay, the door's there, right? I'm going through that
Through
door.
this,
I can't see it, but I
wow.
mean, I think it's really exciting.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fantastic, actually.
Well, I mean, it's inevitable, isn't it? Progress is inevitable, so it's exciting. Some people might be a bit, daunted by it
But
as
it's still
well. But
creative. I
yeah,
think that's a good. People think that AI is taking away creativity. Well, I don't think it is taking away creativity. I think it is taking away job opportunities.
yeah,
I think that's a different thing.
mm,
But I still think, for example, I mean, AI will take over editing to a large extent, but it will never, in my view, replace the editor who says, "Look, I've done it the way you suggested, but now I've done it the way I think might be quite interesting. What do you think?" And you think, "Wow, that's a great idea,"
yeah,
And maybe AI will do that. Yes, it'll give me 10 options. Yes, it will. But I still like the conversation you have with an editor, particularly
mm,
when he says, "So I just think, I thought if it went a bit soggy in the middle, so I've cut it up this way." And you think,
yeah,
and you've got that interchange, which I think is so great.
yeah.
But who knows? AI you'll be able to talk with it. It's going to take
Wow.
over a lot of things.
So you've been involved in filming footage to be used in the Crescent Theatre's forthcoming production of Labour of Love by James Graham. Can you just tell us a little bit about the purpose of these segments of the show and how they sort of work within the whole piece?
Yeah, I think this is a great example of where they're really important, and they have an absolute purpose. I mean, the play moves backwards and then forwards in its time frame,
Mm,
and nothing tells the audience that. Um, so this is a great way of doing it because you're actually going to see the political events in a chronology, which we will superimpose the date over.
yeah.
So people will see that it's going from 2017 to 2015 to 2013. They'll get the message. Plus, it creates you know the environment in which the lead characters story is developing. What was happening at the time he was doing that was the following. I've just started to look at the first transition, and we've got a couple of bits we've shot, and then there's David Cameron announcing the referendum. There's Theresa May coming to power, and I wouldn't have been able to give you a date on any of those without looking it up. So what we're
Mm,
saying to the audience is, we're ending this again. What I've said earlier on about where is it coming from, where it's going to. We're ending this scene in 2017. Here's what happened. Now we're going to take you back,
yeah.
and it's going to go back to 2014, and on we go with the next scene. So I
Mm.
think it's got a really. Would the play work with? Yeah, of course the play would work without it, but not as well.
And I suppose one of the themes of the play is the sort of um, ideological battle for the soul of the Labour Party and the way in which that organisation has changed so much over the 27 years that the play is set. And I think for most people watching it will be reminding them of those things, although some of our audience will not remember the 90s very well, which is when the play, the furthest back it goes, isn't it? But it does, yeah, it sort of sets that backdrop of, so these people in this these relationships are taking place with this
Yeah.
backdrop and the sort of, the themes of the kind of personal and political that are drawn out.
I think it will instantly get people thinking, and it will get their memories going. We were filming a sequence the other day where David Lyons comes back having just won the election, only just,
Yeah.
and he was coming back to party headquarters, and they all went berserk. And we had a flip chart in the background with UKIP written on it, and its numbers and various others. So this
Mm.
debate came into, was UKIP around in 1996? The answer was it was, which surprised us. But what was the most telling moment was when one of the cast said, "Oh, I was one then." And you think, "Oh, great, thank you. I didn't need that remark."
Yeah. It's quite complex then. You're intercutting real footage of political events at the time with scenes that we're creating
Yeah.
from volunteers and members of the cast. How have you approached getting all of that to get, planning all of that? Because there's a lot of logistics there.
Yeah, I mean, the archive is not particularly hard. It's laborious.
Yeah.
Um, you have to, for example, there's a very famous shot of Margaret Thatcher driving away from Downing Street in the
Mm.
car. Actually, you think there is, but when you try and find it,
Mm.
it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
And you want really good shots from that. The actual logistics of what we're doing, I think, is points to one of the key. I said earlier on, people think these things just happen or it's easy, you just do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. This has been a major setup, which Tom Loud has largely taken on
Yeah.
almost single-handedly, but with a lot of help. Um, and that's finding enough what are now called supporting artists,
Yes.
used to be called extras, so that we never see anyone's face twice. We
Yes.
see a lot of back of heads that people might recognise, but they don't see the face twice.
Mm.
Getting the location sorted out, getting the timetable to work, because for all sorts of reasons, I become unavailable in a few days' time. So it was all a
Yeah.
question of getting it in time, um, getting members to be available across weekends, evenings, mornings, what have you, sorting the locations out, persuading people to lend us their places, then getting everybody there on time. Props, costume helps that the director, Stuart, is also very, very good at costumes. That
Yes.
helps enormously. Jackie's been helping out with props. And what's lovely about it, it's been a fantastic job. Tom has done a great job. And it's been very nice for me because, as you said at the beginning, I work both as a producer and a director. Here, it's been great because I've worked really just as the director. I've turned up
Mm.
and it's there.
Yeah.
And I just get on and do my job, and all the setup's been done for me. But I think probably the nicest thing is it's been a real Crescent membership community experience.
Mm.
Everybody pulling together, everybody doing their bit, and a few friends.
Yeah.
We've got Father George from St George's Church down the road who
Yes.
used yesterday.
Yeah.
Is in our film now.
That's
But
lovely.
the
Yeah.
Crescent has the membership have really stepped up, and yeah, it's been a great experience. And now we just got to try and make it. Can we fool people into thinking this is archive? I'm not sure.
I leave that to your skills,
Yes,
Rod.
we'll try.
Yeah. Um, and I know this is a big question, but how do you work differently with actors on film compared with on stage?
Um, I don't think as a director you work any differently.
Mhm.
Um, and for me, that is the most enjoyable part of the job, which is actually it's working with any of the creatives.
Yeah.
It's not just the actors, but designers as well. That's the most enjoyable thing. Um, it's what your expectation is of the actor. So
Yeah.
the actor and it's all about scale.
Mm.
And it's having the ability. I mean, on stage it's quite difficult, and what a lot of stage actors find hard is to bring it right down when you
Mhm.
come to screen, and you can look at someone doing a one-to-one conversation and you think, stop shouting, that is not the way you would talk.
Mm.
What happens there is mostly about volume actually, and a sort of size of action as well.
Yeah.
You have to be a little bit bigger on stage, but ideally you should be natural in both environments in terms of your action. It's the voice more than anything else.
Mm.
What actually happens and drives me mad is, particularly with a lot of younger actors and younger directors, or inexperienced directors, I should say, is mumbling, and
Yeah.
it drives sound operators absolutely mad because they just can't pick it up. And when I see it, I'm always cross with the director because I think it's the director's job to make sure that the audience is hearing,
Yes.
and it's the actor's job to deliver that at the right level, but still with the right emotion. And that's the hard thing. So when doing a very late night, very quiet chat on film, but the sound recordist has got to be able to pick it up. So how do you bring it up just a little bit, but without spoiling the performance? So I
Mm.
think as a director, it's nothing's different. It's just wanting a great performance and helping somebody to do it. It's your expectation of the actors, I think, that's different.
So a lot of amateur theatre actors principally, work on stage, act on stage because it's our hobby. That's what we do, and filming innately requires just more equipment and time, and it's. I know people do make filmmaking is also a semi-professional and amateur activity, but a lot of us, I think, most of our experience is stage. What advice would you give an actor who's coming from that background and then being filmed? What do they need to bear in mind?
I think that's the first point. Is just watch the scale.
Yeah.
Make it absolutely real.
Mm.
It's not your job to capture it. It's somebody else's job to capture it.
Right.
But it's your job to make it look absolutely real. And here's the killer. On stage, you only have to do it once in a show. Expect to have to do it several times
Yeah.
because there'll be different size shots. There'll be something that goes wrong which will be nothing to do with you. There'll be a bus that goes behind, or somebody will do the hello mum bit in the background, or something which you really don't need. So you might have to repeat it several times, and it needs to be the same every time, and it needs to be really good every time.
Yeah.
Even if you're on take 20. It's interesting actually, when you get to high numbers of takes, you very often go back and look at the first take, which might have been a bit rough technically, camera a bit wobbly or something, but you think, do you know what? That was the best performance
Yeah.
because it was fresh. And
Mm.
it's that challenge of staying fresh and just knowing what's going to happen, which is there's going to be bedlam going on around you. Don't worry about it. That's not your worry, not your job. And you will be asked to do this several times.
Yeah.
And it's interesting with experienced screen actors, they get a bit worried if you do a take and you say, yeah, that's great. They say, really?
Yeah.
One take? You say, yeah, that was great. But I always do one for luck in case. I mean, that comes from my film background where you might have had what's called a hair in the gate, which is scratch negative. So you always do another one just in case.
Yes. Yeah.
But sometimes, yeah, what more can I ask? That performance was great. It was nicely shot.
Mm.
Why are we bothering to do it again? But as I say, the experienced screen actors get very nervous there and they think,
Yeah.
surely it wasn't right just in one take.
So, bit of a mean question, Rod, but if you could only direct plays or video slash broadcasting slash film for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
It's actually not mean, and it's a no-brainer. I would choose the theatre.
Why?
Oh, it's a magical moment. There is a somebody came up with the definition. That perfect theatre is the interaction of author, actor, and audience. And that moment, which doesn't always happen,
Mm.
when it all comes together, is just fantastic. And you're unlikely to achieve as good again, but you certainly won't achieve exactly the same again.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so exciting about it. And if you want an audience to gasp and you hear them, that's great. If you want an audience to laugh and you hear them, that's great. And I was just trying to think with all my sons, as the performance developed, there were moments when there was just pin drop silence.
Yeah.
And you think this is a lot of people are absolutely engrossed. Well, the reason why you don't get that in broadcasting is in the name. You cast it broadly
Yeah.
and you have no idea
Mm.
apart from reviewers and figures, but you don't know what people were actually thinking. And you work, I think what I like most about the theatre as opposed to technologically engrossed stuff, which is film and telly, is actually you get into a rehearsal room and it's just the actors. You're not worried about the mics, the sound, the lights, and you
Mm.
just worry that you're concentrating on that and with the other creatives. What's the designer going to do? What's the lighting designer going to do? Um, and it's a more, I don't know, it's a more human interaction, I think.
Yeah. I suppose you get that instant feedback in a stage production, don't you? Of a sense of how the audience are responding, which you don't get when you're making something that's going to be, as you say, broadcast.
Yeah. And I think you see, we shouldn't ever be precious. I mean, you see it, for example, in pantos when the villain comes on and the whole audience boos. You think,
Yeah.
yeah, that's worked.
Yeah.
They've convinced that whole audience he's a nasty piece of work, and the audience is joining in. Well, if you put that on telly, you wouldn't get that feeling at all.
No. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about related to the use of video or AV on stage?
Not really, but I think what I would say in context of the Crescent, in
Yeah.
having done quite a bit of filming over the years with the Crescent, is how well the Crescent actors have adapted to it,
Mm.
um, and have been very easy to direct on camera, um, as easy as they are on, in the
Yeah.
rehearsal room, which is good because some people do completely clam up, but that's not been
Mm.
a problem here. And this particular project is just how much the community has come together to make
Yeah.
it work. It's very much a Crescent production, labour of love. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And I suppose for some people, they quite like to be involved in that way because it's a little bit less commitment than being in a show. And for the most part, they don't have the pressure of learning lines, and there
Absolutely.
are multiple takes as well, so you can you can get it wrong and then it can, be shot again.
Yeah, yeah, they do. I mean, I think that lack of or that less commitment
Mm.
is a key point. I mean, people have been prepared to come. Oh, yesterday, there was almost a cheer when the temperature went up to above freezing when we were out. You think, oh, good, look, it's zero point 0.5. That's good. But there were members out there, standing around doing their bit. But
Yeah,
then it was over in a couple of hours and they'd gone, and that was
yeah,
fine. So it's not a big commitment, but a very important commitment.
absolutely. And I'm sure they will all, feel a sense of satisfaction when they see the show and they get to see those moments and how the bit that they've done has fitted into this it's quite a big kind of canvas, both the stage action and also the kind of videography that runs across the time that the piece spans. So
And it'll be probably the biggest cast list you'll see in a programme ever.
yeah. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Rod, for coming on the podcast again, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of yours, and I know Tom Loud's labours in putting together the video for Labour of Love.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, make sure you subscribe at podcast.crescent-theatre.co.uk or via Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get the next episode. You can find out more about the Crescent Theatre Birmingham and our upcoming productions, including Labour of Love, by visiting www.crescent-theatre.co.uk or by following us on social media. Amateur of Life and Death is a Crescent Theatre production. This month's episode was researched and presented by Liz Plumpton. The music is by Brendan Stanley, and the podcast is edited by Liz Plumpton.